getting a little soft in that sit, but could you all hear me? Wonderful. Okay. Okay. So speaking about lowering the alarm system, lowering the noise, and I'll be circling around this topic. And then just in that sit, I was speaking about the patience of an elephant that's needed with our human pain. And in a sense, knowing that this is an inevitable aspect of our human experience and very workable. And when will we, I sometimes wonder, stop attacking our own insecurity or our own frailty? When will we stop attacking our own insecurity and our own frailty and practice the kindness and patience of an elephant? That sort of patience, it's very noble, I think. It's very, very beautiful, and it's not speedy. So I think it's interesting. Tonight I was thinking, should I talk about spring and sort of distinguish between the healthy desire sort of versus the kind of desire the Buddha can speak about, Tana, the thirst that can get us in trouble. And I wanted to maybe, light up the beauty of healthy desire, but then I ended up just coming back to alarm. And maybe it's the tail end of this year, and I want to be sort of thorough on what we need to do when we're worked up. So that's where I'm going to stay for this talk. So it's inevitable in our human experience that there are times where we lose a sense of clear vision, where we are looking at life out of a certain mood, a certain mind state is coloring our inner atmosphere and will definitely inform the way we're thinking. A certain mood can start making the world look very dark, yeah, or very bright, depending on the mood. And sometimes this can start to feel like reality. The way we're thinking can start to feel that this is really how it is. And we can get a little fixated in a certain state. We can get a little set. This can sometimes happen, just maybe in a day for 20 minutes, where you're just feeling shit and everything's looking a little rough. Or sometimes in life, it can be a prolonged period where we don't feel we have access to something fresh and creative and rich in our human experience. And this is where I think the teachings of the Dharma are always there, in a sense, wanting to remind us that there is a wider horizon, that there's a wider horizon than just this moment or just maybe this particular mood. That there is, with whatever is going on, there is the possibility of accessing fresher, we could say, springs in our experience, or a fresher reference point. And this again, being able to in time have access to this, to have some direct connection to some freshness in our experience, is again something so valuable. A place where we can think from and we can see from, that's less conditioned, that is freer and more open. Where we're not so, say, hamstrung or handcuffed by reacting to certain stimuli in us or what's outside of us. And there's more room to respond. And David White, speaks about in a poem that I'll come back to, but when we are feeling weary or we're feeling tired, how the world starts to look tired too. And he says, time to go into the night. Time to take leave and to go into the night. And the night, like the Dharma, will offer you a horizon further than the eyes can see. That the night, like the Dharma, can offer you to point you towards something more limitless. Something more limitless in our experience, like when we are walking in nature or we're with a very trustworthy lover or friend and something begins to unknot in us and unravel in us. Sometimes there can almost be like a breakthrough feeling of a return to freshness and clear perspective, undefended perspective. And so what the Buddha says, and many of you know this, and it's kind of like very sort of beginning Dharma, but I think something to keep returning to again and again, is that there are certain things in life that we don't actually have control over. But I think we still will try to, like all of us, again and again every day, that we don't have control over, to state the obvious, the weather. You can't tell a storm cloud, you can't stuff a storm cloud into the corner of the sky and say, stop being so outrageously moody, or you can't tell the sun to actually now, go back behind the clouds. And we can't necessarily control some of our own moods. You wake up and you feel terrible, you wake up and you feel really well. We can't control illnesses and frailties in the body and the aging process. But we can have room to respond to what is uncontrollable with more freedom. We can choose to respond to what is uncontrollable. And I think that's actually what's beautiful and mysterious about life, is that we can't control it, that there is something that's beyond our control, that's more mysterious and unruly and unpredictable. But we have room to choose how we respond to it. And that this is the training, in a sense, the essential training of the Dharma, is to learn to have more room to respond. The inevitable is my word of the evening. The inevitable movements and patterns and stimuli of life. And when the heat's on internally, when we are met with an inner rising of a particular mind state that is genuinely challenging, or we are faced, like we have all been faced the last year, with external stimuli that is alarming and challenging, when the heat's on like this, our practice really hits the road, we could say, to learn to not meet that heat with more heat, and to stay with the patience of an elephant and find spaciousness to respond to that stimuli, is incredibly beautiful and is like practicing on the razor's edge. It is practicing on the razor's edge to learn to have the patience of an elephant when the heat's on, because our systems and our bodily systems will tend to respond to that stimuli with alarm. So we will get alarmed, and our physiology will tend to go into fight or flight. It's called like hyper arousal or hypo arousal. We can get excited and activated or flooded. Or sometimes on the other extreme, we can get find it hard to respond or to move, or we lose our words. Yeah, like we feel that we get more frozen. And it's said that in the center of these two responses, there's something called centering and presence and responsiveness. But what is important is to begin to notice if we are in a state of alarm, when we are in a state of alarm, and what that's doing to our body, heart, mind. And that's the beginning and the power of what we hear all the time. One of the 7 powers of mind in the Dharma, and what we hear everywhere, mindfulness, to be mindful of what's happening in our body, heart, mind at any given moment, so we can begin to be in direct contact with reality. And so, as we know, when alarm starts to enter our system, it's very easy to keep spinning. I think we all know that when we're in alarm, it's very easy to actually turn the washing machine on high, to respond. It will keep spinning, and we'll spin it even more. And one response to alarm when we're under duress, is to spin out. And when the clothes are spinning in the washing machine, you can't see, everything's sort of, the water's there, you don't know what's jeans, what's t-shirt, what's knickers. Everything gets kind of merged, and the colors are sort of in each other, and it can be quite confusing. And so from there, we'll try to answer that spin in all different ways. And I think this is sort of interesting. So when we're in a spin, and when we're out of our own seat, in a sense, out of our own connection, and not connected to this capacity to have presence and to respond from our sanity. So when we're in a spin and we are under the thumb of this reactivity to stimuli, which may be patterns of worry, or it may be self-harassing attacks, it may just be melancholy, doldrums that make everything look a little shadowy, When we're under any of those kind of spins, it's said that it's really hard, and I think this is really key here. Like when we're in a spin, we're in a trauma response, is another way, sort of contemporary way to say it. And again, this word's becoming buzzword, when we're triggered, and we're not, which means what we're seeing is landing in us, and we're bringing the life of the past is sort of flaring up in response to something that's happening in the here and now. It's said that when we're in that state, it's hard to feel our own goodness or the goodness of another. So when we're not having access to our own goodness or the goodness of another, it takes some mindfulness. No, I'm in a spin. I right now am in a spin is the bridging, and we're beginning to come more into contact with reality. Because in that spin, without the mindfulness, which is one of the first powers of mind, it's said that it's like I've used this metaphor a bit this year, it's in the sutras, that it's like a man dragging us by the limbs and throwing us into a fire, into the movie of the own making of our mind. Yeah, the way we can be entrapped by our own thinking, and it feels very real. You're in the past or in the future, and we're not actually in direct contact with now. And the mind has a very masochistic habit sometimes, of continuing to go down holes thinking there'll be cheese where there's actually no cheese, because it's a familiar groove, and we'll just go there again. Well, this doesn't actually feel good. This isn't very unhelpful, actually. No, this really isn't actually unhelpful. No, this is really making me cower. This is diminishing my sense of my own goodness. And the mindfulness, like we put the brakes on that movement of mind. I'm in a spin. I'm influenced by a mind state right now. That is fantastic practice. Sometimes that's all we can do. The mind will keep going, but we are suspicious of the movement of our own mind. And that is such healthy suspicion. That is such like radical subverting the whole show of the mind to keep us out of our own seat. Because and when I talk about, say, this spin and an overacted nervous system, I think it's interesting too, because we live in a culture that will almost support it. We live in a culture that supports war. We live in a culture that supports capitalism. When we're in that spin, it's really important, I think, to also know we're vulnerable, because that's where we're vulnerable to sort of capitalistic agendas of advertising, that you need this to be happy, that you need this, that you're not enough, that da, 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 da. So it's sort of really important to kind of go, okay, when I'm in a spin, I'm vulnerable, and potentially I'm going to make compromised, shortcut, quick fix decisions, And we all know the power of addiction, probably. I imagine to greater or lesser degrees, all of us know that. I remember being, as a teenager and exploring, and I can really remember that mood of in a melancholy spin of this kind of, how you could jump back on a self-destructive kind of track, thinking that might, answer something, the sort of like, oh, well, fuck it anyway, I'm just going to go there, And there's a certain despondency that will sort of carry us through. And it takes a sort of brightness of mind, as I said, to sort of wrap that and to come back to presence. And so, we have so much workability in our own mind. So yes, we have cultural influences that can support the spin, that can support us to sort of stay in the washing machine where we can't quite see what's what. And I think but still, we have the power. Oh God, I'm sounding like a movie now, but we have the power in our own mind to free ourselves. And I think that is amazing, like when the Buddha says, be a light to yourself, be a light to really look at your own thinking process. Yes, I think in each of us, our suffering is not an isolated unit. Like our own suffering will often in some way be some kind of presentation of a phenomena that's happening within the whole culture, So, that we inside of us, we will live through sufferings that are connected, they're interdependent on cultural views, So a woman who's depressed about her weight, say, you can't say, hey, that's your fault, honey. You know what I mean? It's like you got a whole culture that's supporting a view like that. Or for a man that's going through a period of vulnerability and finds it hard to meet that with tenderness, when you have a culture that still has a training to allow men to fight in war or something, It's like we put these people in positions and they act in, pretty extreme ways, but we have to look at how we're complicit in. Anyway, that's a sort of another line of inquiry. But, but saying that, yeah, that's true. But ultimately, how can we start to take responsibility for our own mind and for our own freedom? Because this leadership in the country is not going to be talking to our better angels, like broadening the view of how we can unnumb ourselves as a human being and have more empathy and be in clearer direct connection with what's around us. But we can foster that in ourselves. We can take that agency. So when we are in a spin, I want to just talk a little bit about when we are in alarm and what we can do. And then I'll just walk through that a little bit. How can we be supported to come back to some sovereignty and some inner alignment to an empowerment of our own perception and our own sanity and our own heart and the right to live how we want to live? So, yes, because so often when we're in that fight or flight and arousal or collapse, it's one response that we once had to go into as a sort of evolutionary species when there was danger, but it's still so wired into our systems. And the thing is that now, pretty much most of the time, that response isn't supporting us. It's more interfering with our capacity to be fresh. So when we are in a state of alarm and we're bringing the mindfulness in, yeah, the first thing is just to know, oh, wow, I am in a bit of a state. And the things that human beings can do in those states and can spin with action and with voice can often create so much later remorse. You know, there's so things happen within that kind of state. We all, you know, all human beings can act in really extreme ways when we're in that kind of state. So just to know, yeah, I'm in an activated state. And with that awareness, to start to feel the body and start to notice how that state of mind is influencing the breath. And how in that state are you feeling in the belly? And to know this is a state that will pass. It's not good to think too much when you're in that state, because the thinking's not going to be trustworthy, you know. So maybe think this is because that state will make us also very much jump into the mind and try to figure things out at 100 speed, you know. And that thinking is not going to be genius, brilliant, innovative thinking to the issues of the world usually, you know. So it's like, okay, what's it doing with my breath? What's it doing with my body? That will just start to kind of take the edge off. And really simple things. Often it's good to get as far away from the head as you can, just into the feet. So the training, just to come back to feel the feet, or just to open the eyes and just to look around freshly what's around you, and even move your gaze to something that attracts you, to something that's even beautiful around you. And these are sort of tried and tested sort of techniques. Yeah, to be able to maybe give room to let the breath, you know, like settle. To radically, because often in those states, when that's also when our survival strategies come in, because we're not living then, we're in survival in those moments. What is it to, again, when we're under duress, and this is a radical training, respond with tenderness and not attack. Because often when we're in those states, also the mind will kick in to try to protect us, but in a really brutish kind of way. I don't know why. It's just what I've tracked in myself and hundreds of students. So a tenderness. And just then we're starting to now be in very much more direct contact with reality, because we're not just believing in the thoughts that state will propel us into. They might still be happening, but we're suspicious of them. Yeah, we're coming into the body. We're feeling the breath, we're sort of maybe feeling the feet, we're looking at what's around us. Something that you can do also is just to move the eyes, which helps the eyes just to move to the side one way or the other way, because it sort of interrupts something in the inner chemistry and the vagal nerve. Eyes going to the right, to the left, just looking around. Here I am in this moment. Yeah. And when we start to feel safe enough, we start to get a little bit safe again. We start to feel a bit safe again. For some of us, this is a practice you may need to do for 4 years, again and again and again. No problem. Some it might just be 5 minutes every day. Some it might be once every 2 years. And again, that patience of an elephant, to work with the truth of our own experience, is just really powerful. And it takes time to let the body, heart, mind start to feel safe. You know? And we also need to be quite radical, because alarm and triggers and stimuli is going to keep coming in this world and in these times. And I think we all know that environmentally, you know. So I think to start to get sort of sassy around this, and some intelligence around this, and some training around this, so we don't lose our sovereignty and our inner alignment in the midst of our external environment is so potent and so powerful. Like, and I can't get behind that more, you know, and to start to choose, you know, a little bit more agency in how we want to live and where we want to put our attention and what we want to foster in ourselves. So mindfulness, as we start to feel a bit safer, we can start to then come into the second power of mind, which is investigation. We can start to ask more questions and we can start to look at life more openly. You know, is that true? Is it going to help anyone for me to stay anxious and alarmed? Is that going to help the problems of the world? Am I going to be more effective by responding from anxiety? Like, to really look. And when I look, I really don't function so well under anxiety when I'm anxious, you know? It's like the world go, get anxious about this. And then it's, you know, this whole sensational news and this sensationalism that keeps the whole world in this alarm. So none of us kind of like are acting sensibly. So we kind of like go against this. When we can have open thinking, the Buddha really yearned, I think, for us, to be a light unto ourselves and to have the capacity to free thinking. And free thinking is supported by someone who feels safe. To be able to look into the heart of the matter. What is this? What is this pain? To look kindly, you know, how am I tying myself up to not see? What's this old pattern of thinking? Is this serving me anymore? Should I follow that? Maybe not. You know, maybe I should be radical and actually learn to trust and soften here, because why not? You know, maybe I should find my house of belonging here, even if some of the world is a little bit on fire. Yeah. And that's really beautiful, to keep coming home, to keep allowing for some belonging. And we have to do that. No one's going to give it to us again. You know? Like, there is some agency in taking that and partaking in that. And when we do that and we feel connected, I think we can be so much more effective. And I think we also need to support each other in that. Yeah, we be a light unto ourselves to free ourselves internally from some of the patterning of our own mind that restricts us and freaks us out, to get more liberation there. And then we need support of others, sort of to keep going down that track. And when we are sort of thinking freely, like when you sort of ask yourself, when do my most creative, brilliant moments happen? Sometimes it's under duress, sometimes. But sometimes it's often like waking up from a nap, you know, or a moment where you're just kind of like, I don't know, skateboarding or something, or, you know, walking a little bit looser. And then like a really brilliant moment, okay, I'm actually going, I want to, whatever it may be, I want to contribute in this manner, or I need to actually stop this and I need to cultivate something else. I don't know where it's going, but I have to follow that, you know, and to be able to be alive to that kind of insight when it's in us, and then have the balls or the breast to follow through, you know, there's time for a transition or it's time for a change, and to follow that with love. I think that's really powerful as well. Yeah. And so, yeah, and then we have that. So we're getting settled enough, we're getting safe enough so we can start to think freely, and how to also be able to look openly, to not look with such an agenda of wanting to be right, you know, to be able to look at something, we're not defending our position. We're not so, again, in alarm and defending our sort of sense in an argument or something and getting all reactive, which we will again do, but how to soften in those moments and be sort of more radically open is so liberating, you know, when you find yourself having just the freedom to respond to somebody else without getting your back up. That's another really beautiful feeling that's so nursed by a meditation practice of settling down under the alarm. And then so we have the mindfulness and we have the investigation, and then we also actually have the joy, which is interesting, that through open seeing and to feel we can be more free in how we look, there can be some joy, and that also being a mobilizing energy that helps us follow through and act in fruitful ways. and joy being very connected to appreciation and gratitude just for what's around us. So opening our mind and training our mind in that way, because like we can move into fight and flight, we very quickly can also move into being, what is it called? Yeah, the negative biasing of experience. I'm like that. Like I'll give a talk and, I get some great responses and one person's just, dirty on it. And like, that's the one, like I'll remember, you know, and that's what loud. And then, but it's like, how can we train ourselves in actually receiving goodness and and being grateful and turning to what's beautiful and what's, the good, the true and the beautiful, and to bring that into us. Like that's a healthy body that can start to do that. That's not an indulgent body. That's like an elegant body that isn't just propelling on the negative biasing, but it's also training into what's also beautiful. This is an extreme example, but like the Zen monk who's like on the edge of the cliff, and he's like, there's one raspberry he's holding on, but he's still willing while he's gripping on with one hand. And that's how we feel sometimes when we're under threat. That's how it will feel when we are gripped in flight or flight, like where that's in survival, we're hanging off the cliff with one hand. How can we still, to training, how can we still go and just eat that one raspberry, even if the rest of us is bound up? So that training will start to tunnel us into something limitless and beautiful in our experience. So this joy and this appreciation. And then we also have, because sometimes we can get sort of overexcited in that joy, and the Buddha's always like, hey, don't get off on that, Again, like our system will spark off, the alarm will kind of kick up into the excitement, because some of us actually are quite comfortable with sort of negativity, but we freak out when there's joy. Is this trustworthy? Am I going to get in trouble? Can I really feel this good, And for some of us, it's a practice in realigning and conducting that which feels really, really good, And to align with that takes some, which is the next factor, friend, of being able to, like, tranquility and rest. This is really simple. Like, are you getting enough rest? Are you getting enough hours in the night? Are you sleeping enough? Or if you're going through a period of insomnia, are you doing whatever you can to let yourself have moments where you're sheltered, where you're nourished, where you're sort of nursed, These are like basic human, elements that help us come into our own ease and potency and help us, I think, act in the world creatively, more freshly. So are you getting enough rest? And this rest being really, I think, so important. And then we also have meditation. And so we could say, in a sense, like that training of mindfulness, where we're noticing our mind, where we can start to feel the heaviness of our body. We can start to feel our breath. In a sense, that's all sort of preliminary practices. It's like pre-meditation for when meditation comes, when we are dropping or resting into, we could say, like a deeper source. We're becoming absorbed in some inner experience. And those moments of, say, samadhi, it's called in the Dharma, and we all will have touched in on them. They are so healing for the being. When we're out of the run of the conditioned mind, we're gone. This I that's trying to work it all out has some momentary time off, and we open up, and there's something more flowing, and we're absorbed, and it's open, and it's more empty, and there's even maybe love starting to pour through the cells, and it's the most beautiful reference point for life that makes you go, oh yeah, this is again what being human can be. When we can touch that, and it's like our solidity is melted, our walls where we're separate is melted, and we have more access to life again. We're partaking, we're sharing, we're not so self-conscious, we're not also like freaked out, we're beautiful. The Buddha wanted us to spend a lot of time there. And all cultures will have rituals to get you there, knowing that that's very regenerative. It's very regenerative to have some flow of energy through the body. You can also do it through dance. There's other ways, but those absorption states, samadhi, really helpful to keep coming with a freshness. when we're connected and we're more informed by the source, by something that's not just our doing. It's the sort of more mystical, magical, beautiful aspects of practice. It's like sometimes you don't really know what practice is doing, but you keep sitting and you let yourself go into these places where you don't even really know where you are or who you are, but something gets untethered there, something loosens there. And then you may find a year later, rushes of creativity come up. You have your best thinking. I really have seen, like, I remember practicing in India in pretty extreme circumstances in my early 20s with people. And like 10 years later, feeling all this fruit emerging between us. So it's like there's something mysterious that we don't know where our practice will take us. But that dedication and that patience to keep coming under the alarm, to keep challenging the mind, to keep looking at what is beautiful, to have rest, to settle, to choose to maybe go down the not so known track and not the main track that gets very thorny. All of that is precious practice. And then we have the equanimity, the final factor, the final friend, which is in time. As I said, we can't control so much of life, but we do have astonishing sovereignty that takes a training and takes support and takes certain conditions, to be able to respond differently to inner and outer stimuli. And this is where our freedom can kind of lie. So it's said that, the suffering won't necessarily change. Like we will, yes, all age, and we will all lose people we love. And we will all one day not be here in these beautiful bodies, And so that's all that's going to keep coming at us. But the one who suffers can open, and the one who suffers can become wider. The one who suffers can, through training and through time, to be able to respond with creativity and wisdom and dignity to the inevitable fire of experience in little ways and then sometimes big ways. And the image of equanimity is that, sometimes the salt, the sting of life will come into us and we're more like a little teacup, So we sting really hard, we sting really bad. But in time, as we loosen our boundaries and we open, we become more like the Buddha said, the Ganga. So the same sting will come in, but we're wider, we're not so bordered. So I always find that quite a beautiful analogy. So I always prepare too much. Yeah. Oh, wow, we've already gone over. I had a lot more to say about harnessing the pause of COVID-19. Let's not get back to normal and habituation too quickly. What radical maybe insights did you have through this time about maybe how you need to live differently and be more aligned, more sustainable in your living, if that's with your own rest, but also, our own relationship to the environment and to each other? Yeah, and just, wish everybody well in this emergence out of this, extreme time, to those in Melbourne, to everybody in Melbourne and also everybody interstate. It's been such a treasure. It's been one of my highlights to be able to have people come out of this state, to these, to sit together and to explore the Dharma together in these, potentially alarming times that can provoke alarm. How can we have a more radical response as practitioners? So thank you for your ears, your listening. Sorry I didn't leave more time for questions. I just got on a bit of a roll.